So good morning, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Preparing for Post-SSWP System Access Request and Bart Support. My name is Harry Overstreet II. I am your Bart Small Business Support Services Post-Award Project Administrator. It's a mouthful. And I'd like to briefly go over some guidelines for today's webinar. We ask that you mute yourself, which will minimize all background noises. We want to encourage you to ask questions. Please use the raise your hand button to identify that you have questions, or enter your question into the chat section. And we'll pause in between sections to see if you do have questions and to make sure we address your questions. This webinar is a part of Bart's Small Business Week support. It is National Small Business Week, so we applaud all of you who have the courage to endeavor and be an entrepreneur in the small business. So our mission is to help you be successful in this public works environment, pursuing Bart contracts. And to give you a brief overview of our program as a whole, we have some excellent pre-award services which are designed to help you pursue and obtain Bart work. Here's a quick listing of some of the services. Again, I'm on the post-award side as your post-award project administrator. We have an excellent team of engineers who are available to assist you with the specific processes and procedures required by Bart. They are numerous, they're critical, and we want to help you understand those so that you can be successful and ideally make a profit. Here is a quick listing or glossary of some of the terms that you will hear throughout the presentation. I'll leave this up for just a half a second just so you can take a look at it. We hope that you, if you have questions, you can refer back to that. And some of these may be familiar to you, but some of these are Bart specific terms that are critical to understanding, the procedures, in the environment that you're working in, the Bart construction environment. And so with that, I will let our presenters, our very seasoned engineers, introduce themselves and continue with our presentation.
Okay, thank you, Harry, and good morning, everyone. Glad to have you join us today. My name is Luis Paez, and I am a senior project manager, resident engineer with the Allen Group. I've been working on Bart contracts for approximately the last 10 years and have been delivering public works and private projects for the last 30 plus years. And I'm glad to be here to express some of our just kind of, insights and experiences to you in working in the Bart environment. I'll turn it over to Nick here.
I see. I'm wearing the right shirt today. I'm matching my picture. But I'm Nick Houchin. I am the director of operations at the Allen Group. I'm currently running our construction management program with Bart. I worked on Bart projects for the last 10 years as OE inspector, resident engineer, assistant resident engineer. So I've had a lot of experience managing the Bart projects and the different challenges you face in there. So I'm hoping to at least give some of the information and knowledge I've learned over that time working with Bart. All right, next slide. So just before I go over the agenda, the idea behind today's workshop, the post-SSWP after you've gotten that approved, and I'll talk a little bit about that SSWP too, just because it's good to frame it with that, is that there's a whole Bart world that exists for actually having how you get your work done and planned and scheduled and executed once you actually have your SSWP approved. And we've seen from our side of working on contracts, a lot of times there can be challenges to getting your work done if you don't know how to navigate the system and you don't know what your resident engineer who's planning some of this work with all these groups needs to be successful in terms of the right information, what the RE is going to be doing, the groups are going to be talking to, and how the contractor or the sub can fit into that equation. So we wanted to shed some light about some of these groups and items that are kind of behind the scenes and bring them out to the forefront so that you as a contractor or subcontractor can kind of understand what's happening behind the scenes and how to best support the resident engineer and executing the work. Going over our agenda today, we're gonna, like I talked about, we're gonna go over first just the access requirements. We're gonna talk about the groups you will be having to coordinate with, the support groups at Bart. We'll talk about how you actually plan to work with those groups and how you plan work with the resident engineer to plan out that work. And we'll also go over some of the best practices we've seen for in relation to that. Next slide. So first, I'll be going over the system access, BART system access requirements. Next slide. And really, the way I like to frame that is you have the SSWPs, which is the site-specific work plan. That is your plan that details exactly how you're going to do your work, what equipment you're going to use, how you're going to stage the equipment, what are the risks for impacts to BART's operations, and what mitigation plans for impacts to BART's operations. It's going to tell you, your safety procedures. It's going to show you how basically every step of your process and how that interacts with BART's operations. The point of that SSWP or site-specific work plan is to ensure that BART can vet that you will be able to perform your work safely and that you'll be able to do this work with minimal impact to BART operations. And if there are impacts to BART operations, which happens, they're unavoidable sometimes, that they're highlighted and that they're planned and that there's mitigation plans, and BART is actually aware of them and can work with you to mitigate those impacts. So I'll go a little more detail that, but the site-specific work plan, basically, that's something you should be working on as soon as you get in TP, because there's a 42-day review period with all of BART stakeholders. And if you have to resubmit it, that restarts the clock. Obviously, your RE is going to work to expedite that and get that done as fast as possible. But you should know that this site-specific work plan can be a time-consuming process. And especially if you're not working hand in hand with the RE, really it involves the RE will be submitting this SSWP to a portal, which then gets routed to all of the key stakeholder groups at BART, which could be 10, 12 different groups from, the electrical group, comm, mechanical, structural, all the engineering groups, operations, transportation, it's the whole gamut. So this document will get reviewed by all those parties, and each of those parties have to approve it in order for your work to then be allowed to proceed to be scheduled in the field. So that SSWP is really a critical document, and it's something you should jump on right away as soon as you get on a project. The next step is the system access request. And this is the way I like to frame these is the SSWP is basically long-term, how do you plan all of your work? The system access is kind of your short-term plan for the work you're planning to do that the next week or 2 weeks. And then the work orders is basically once you're out there and you're the day of, how do you actually get in to do your work? So that's kind of how these 3 steps work out. The system access request, or we call it SARs on this page, is the process for how you actually schedule your work on a week-by-week basis in BART's operating envelope. So to give some background on this, BART has a group called this, they have a system access committee that meets every week on Wednesday. And basically what will happen is your resident engineer or BART representative, and we'll show an example of this on a future slide, they will submit a request through an online data portal that says, hey, here's the work that my contractor is going to do in the BART system for a specific time period. It's a week-by-week basis. And so the way it works is, say you want to work, say today's Friday, and you want to work out at BART in BART's operating envelope. Well, next Wednesday, the committee will meet to review all of the requests to be able to work not next week, but the week after. So it's basically almost a 2-week lag. And so when you submit, you have to submit your system access request by Monday, the latest. So if you were submitting for that 2 weeks from now, you would have to get your requests in by this coming Monday in order for them to review it on Wednesday. So that's how it works out in terms of BART system. So as a contractor and a sub, you should basically know that you can't just go out, say, oh, actually, I want to work, on tomorrow, or I want to work on next Tuesday and go out in the field. Like, you can't do that at BART. You actually have to plan it out in at least 2 weeks out. And so you need to be planning with your resident engineer, telling them in your 4-week look aheads what you're going to be looking for, what you're going to be doing, and then giving specific information to your engineer. And that type of information on the system access request, it's going to tell you, it's going to tell BART exactly where you're going to be working. It's going to be telling you how many people you're going to have out there. It's going to be telling them, hey, we need specific BART support, which I'll go over in the next slide about what actually that looks like. And then it's also going to be telling them what hours you're going to be working. And so the committee basically has to take all of this information from every single contractor and subcontractor and review it all together to ensure that they minimize impacts to BART, that they ensure that 2 different contractors aren't trying to work in the same area, and also to make sure that that area actually can be accessed safely during that time, because BART will have shutdowns, they'll have different events happening where you can't work because it's not safe during that time period. So these system access requests is basically how you get your work planned out for that 2 weeks from the day you're submitting it. And once that does get approved, then once you actually need to go out and access specific areas, say at BART, locate where you're actually working has a huge impact on what it takes to actually get your work done. So if you're working in the station, if you're working in the trackway, if you're working in facilities like electrical room, train control room, if you're working just out in a parking lot, each of these areas has very specific rules and requirements for how you get your work done. And working hand in hand with your RE, they will give you the proper information to tell you what those rules and requirements are. But that also changes how you actually get in to do your work once you're there. So for the work orders, a BART representative called an EIC, which is an employee in charge, they will be the one that actually calls in either to the yard, or we call the command center, OCC, to tell them, hey, we have this approved work. We're ready to go out. We're going to be working during this time for this amount of hours. And they actually will have to call in and get authorization to, say, enter a train control room or go into the trackway. And so this is the process for when you're actually out there the day of, how you get in and out of the work. And I'll talk more about the EIC in the next slide. But basically, in summary, this is the three-step process for long-term planning, SSWP, short-term planning with your system access requests, and then the day of, how you actually get access is through work orders. You can go to the next slide. And at any point, if you have questions, please jump in and raise your hand or put it in the chat. I know I'm covering a lot of material, so I'm happy to answer any questions if people have them. So the system access request, this is basically an example. I just want to go over, I'm not going to go over every detail, but it gives you an example of the type of information, the detail of information that has to go into this request for BART to review it. So it goes through a whole gamut of items, and the RE basically needs to know enough detail about your work for them to actually fill this out accurately, to make sure that it actually gets approved, and that when you show up to do the work, that you actually are matching what the information this request says. So you'll see it has basically work periods, activities. It tells them which support you'll need, which dates you're going to be working, how many people you're going to have out there. So that we just wanted to show an example of what you will also get back from your RE. Once it's approved by the committee, they'll provide you this document for your record to just show, hey, here's what was approved by BART. You can go to the next slide. So to talk about, I know I mentioned BART support groups, and I didn't get into the details of that because we're going to go over that during this section. You go to the next slide. One second, Nick, there we go. So for for Bart support. So basically, since Bart's assets are so critical to Bart's operations, they and for most of the things you'll be working on at Bart, say if you're working on a electrical panel or in the train control room or you're out in the trackway, or working on communication equipment, Bart requires that a representative from their maintenance group is actually out there with you while you do the work. And so we call this Bart support. But the idea behind that is that Bart really wants to ensure the safety of their, of your workers out there, and also to ensure that you're not going to impact operations. And also, if something did happen unexpectedly, they could quickly respond and restore service. And before I'll get into the actual specifics of those groups, I was going to highlight the number one person, which normally is the employee in charge. So they call it an EIC at Bart, and this will be a district employee that they provide. If you're going to say, let's give an example, you need to work on running conduit and comm wiring through a train control room, they're going to require that when you do that work, they have an EIC there, an employee in charge there, and they will actually be the person that manages your access in and out, and they're in charge of the safety of your workers working in that area. So their number one priority is safety and impact to operations. And I like to, so basically, to just provide some specific on that is, I like to highlight just the background of the EIC. That what they're worried about is they want to, all they care about, their number one priority is safety and the operation. So when you're working with them, you should know that, like your field staff, whether it's your foreman or your superintendent, they need to know that the EIC, that's what they're looking for. And so you really need to ensure there's good communication between your EIC and your field staff, because the EIC can shut your work down at any moment if they want to. If they feel like something's unsafe, if they feel like your plan, you're deviating from the approved plan that they have, the system access request or the SSWP, your site-specific work plan. If you're deviating from that, they can shut the work down. And at that point, that's on the contractor. There's, so you really need to be careful with how you communicate with them, ensure that you are totally on the same page on what's happening at all times in the field. And they can be really helpful. So if you really work with them, they can provide you, great guidance on what you can and can't do. And if you do run into problems, unexpected issues out in the field, they can help you problem solve in terms of, hey, we might not be able to do this tonight, but if you come back, here's the support you'll need. Here's how we'll have to get it done. So the EICs can be very helpful, but you really need to work hand in hand with them. And the EIC will be designated by Bart. Your RE will basically request for it. They'll say, hey, we need an EIC for this work. And the EIC will then be designated by Bart to come out and basically give you access to those areas. The other areas is the site, basically the discipline specific support. And that is, if you're working on electrical panels, traction power, comm, they'll basically designate a specific person from those groups to have them come out with you, help make sure that you're doing the work properly. Say if you're working on an electrical panel, that you've properly identified the right panels to lock out and tag out, that the panels you're working on it's in a safe condition, or they can help advise. And same thing with like traction power and comm. They're going to basically ensure that you're being safe with their assets. And so these groups are going to be requested by your RE based on the information you give the RE. So we keep going back to that, the criticality of proper communication with your resident engineer, making sure that you're giving them detailed information and that you understand your plan and that the contractor understands their work so they can give that proper information. And Luis will go more into those items on his slides. The last one is just there's some other groups you could interact with, which is like if you need support for equipment out in the rail, like a high rail vehicle, you could be working with the track groups. And then the other items is location. So basically where you're working, there's different groups that have authority. So if you're working in a yard, the yard has control over all movement of trains in their area. And so you will need to be working hand in hand with communicating with the yard personnel to ensure that you're not impacting their operations. Or if you're working out near mainline, you'll be communicating with OCC, and which is the central command. So they manage all the trains on the main line. Oops, I think we went backwards.
Yep,
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. But basically, and then I'm not going to go through every single group that Bart has, but basically there's other key stakeholders that actually manage the operations in those areas. So like the station managers, while you may not be directly coordinating with them, the RE will. You may have to do site walks with these people to show them, hey, here's my work. Here's what I'm doing. Here's how it might impact your station. If I'm running conduit in front of a fare gate, you may have to shut the fare gate down. Well, BART stations operators need to know that, and then they need to communicate that information to the station agents who actually are boots on the ground running the station on a day-to-day basis. So there's all these different levels of stakeholders working at BART that you may not necessarily talk to every day, but they can shut your work down if the communication hasn't happened properly between the RE and them, or between you and your RE to them. So that's why it's really critical to know these different groups exist, and that you're going to have to be providing the right information to your RE to coordinate with them. And then I think we can go to the next slide. And now I'll be turning over to Luis.
And just like to pause for just a quick question, just a moment in case there are any questions. So
Yeah, thanks, Harry.
as we transition, and again, the chat is open for questions, and you're welcome to raise your hand. Mr.
Yeah.
Paez.
Can you hear me, Harry?
Yes, I can. We got you unmuted.
Okay, I apologize. I had to switch over to my phone. My computer was having some issues. So thank you for that. So yeah, thank you, Nick. That was a wealth of information. Let's jump into the planning for BART work. Next slide here. And we'll start with that information in a moment. I did want to add to a few points that Nick made, and I think it is very important to understand, right, that the system, that the site-specific work plan, the SSWP, you start on that early. I just wanted to make a point because there are requirements for the SSWP that all your critical submittals be in and approved before that SSWP gets in. So it's really important to get started on the baseline schedule. Again, I don't know how many prime contractors are on this call, but we know that there's a dance between the subs and the prime in getting their schedule completed. We just recommend that start as early as possible, even at notice of award. BART projects have defined contract duration, and there's potentially LDs related to delays in completing your work in a timely manner. So just want to avoid those at all possible. So again, getting an early start, getting to that pre-con meeting with your RE, getting to know all the different requirements for the project is essential. Getting those early critical submittals in for your baseline schedule, your schedule of values, temporary controls, noise, and pollution mitigation plans, also sweepies. There's a variety of things, surveying the existing conditions in the areas you're going to be working in. All these things have to take place during the same time, concurrent with your SSWP, while you're putting that together. But again, the SSWP has to be submitted when all or most of these critical submittals have already been approved. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so looking at planning for BART work, right? An essential part of that is the 4-week look-ahead schedule, which is a contract required submittal that the general contractor has to provide. It's in 013216 schedule requirements in your spec book for your particular BART project. And it requires a calendar time bar chart format that depicts the general contractor's work and activities, including the subcontractor activities for the upcoming 4-week period. This has to be submitted weekly, usually the Monday of every week for the next 4 weeks. And it's something that's reviewed between the resident engineer and the general contractor. And by the time that's happening, the pre-review with the subs should have already occurred. Right? So there's a lot of planning and coordination that has to occur before that 4-week look ahead schedule is even provided to the RE. And then typically it's reviewed in the weekly progress meeting with stakeholders and other personnel that are on the meeting to discuss and understand your upcoming work for the next month or so. So again, that's goes over the durations and sequences of work, and it's just very important to the planning of your work moving forward, right? Again, subcontractor coordination and buy-in is critical, as we mentioned. So if you're a sub and you have procurement issues or delays or timelines, you have to relate that to your general contractor, have them understand to the highest degree possible the requirements that you have as a subcontractor for the timely completion of your work and planning around that, right? So again, getting those submittals in early, understanding how complete they are. You don't want to go through 2 or 3 or 4 iterations of submittals because that will again delay your ability to order materials, to order equipment, and to be able to perform your work in a timely manner. So again, that's a critical coordination. Again, notification to your RE, communication is essential. Now, this is all around system access requests, but it starts at the beginning, right? And I know it's difficult for subs that don't typically talk to the RE, right? That's a communication that mostly happens between the general contractor and the resident engineer, because the prime, the GC, is contractually linked to Bart, right? The contract is between Bart and the GC. GC will have subcontracts with your subcontractors. So again, any concerns you have as a subcontractor, push them forward to your general contractor. And if they cannot help you, suggest or ask for them to communicate with the Bart resident engineer, who's really the direct link and administrator of the project for the district for Bart. Don't fail to do that, especially if you're being held up and field delays will be impacting your operations or your ability to perform your work in a timely manner. Okay, work during the blanket hours. So Bart has a blanket between 1:30 and 4 a.m. So it can move around a little bit, but that's when the trains aren't out running, and basically Bart is shut down to the public. This is a time where much of your work that's near the trackway, if you have trackway work or work in train control rooms or electrical rooms, can occur, and you can shut down power to other Bart assets, right? And work on a panel, things like that, electrical panel and so forth, right? That's just one example. But that work has to be coordinated again ahead of time. Like Nick mentioned, the system access request is put in a couple of weeks ahead of the planned work. So there's a lot of planning just to understand what you need to do. That coordination with your RE to understand what support you might require in the IC, or a Bart electrician, or a Bart elevator, escalator, or communications. There's various departments, right, that may need to provide you support for you to perform your work in Bart's stations, on their equipment, right? There's a variety of different impacts or needs that may be around that. So again, your Bart RE will be the one to guide you through that and help you understand what those requirements are and how to complete them. Right, and the closure calendar. This is a calendar that Bart puts out, and it's typically not available to the contractors, but the RE does see it. He can provide it to the general contractor. Indicates dates, events, and locations when Bart facilities are unavailable due to closures. Right, the calendar that's color coded, and we're going to see it here in a moment. I think it's on the next slide if you want to pull it up here. Okay, well, actually, this is the blanket affecting calendar, but we can go over this. There's a couple of different calendars. And this indicates dates and times when the BART system railway locations may prevent from dropping the blanket, which means that there may be no blanket, and you're not allowed to work near the trackway because BART is maybe training train operators, doing other activities along the trackway that would prevent work from occurring. Right, this is one example. Testing and inspection of work that was completed, etc. Again, safety is paramount at BART. So oftentimes there may be changes to schedules and blanket and so forth and access that are safety related. And if those occur and you have work planned, you've scheduled your personnel to do work, you've got PIC, you've got everybody, and then it's called off. Well, BART does provide for some relief for the contractor and subs. You scheduled your people and everybody's dialed in, and you're going to lose a shift. There's an operations delay allowance that's allowed in every contract. So an allowance that you can bill against to reimburse you as a sub or general contractor for the personnel and time that was lost for that shift. So it's just a way for BART to help make you whole as a contractor for loss of being able to do your work, which they know is an impact to your bottom line. So that's helpful to keep in mind. So let's go to the next calendar, because that was the calendar I was first talking about, is the closure calendar. So this typically provides notice of, parades. You'll see that in yellowish down here on the right-hand side, different types of parades that are shown that impact BART stations, especially downtown San Francisco, like the M line, which is can be from Daly City all the way down to Embarcadero. So there's impacts that occur, and it's important to be aware of them. Again, the RE is going to be aware of them and be able to coordinate that with you as the general contractor. And if the general feels their subs may be impacted, they'll relate that to you as well. Okay, so go to the next slide. Okay, so best practices for requesting support. But this is an important slide, and let's go on to the next one here. Okay, and again, best practices are something that are developed on a as needed basis, on a location basis, right? But I think there's some that are very logical and easy to understand, right? Is know your work and plan accordingly. Right? So if you're a subcontractor, you're going to have really detailed knowledge of your scope. And don't always assume that your general contractor knows that, knows what you know, right? So you have to be able to coordinate, communicate. I highly believe in written communication so that you have a basis by which to go back on and create a record of requests and notices and protect yourself, right? Understand that your work is hinged on proper and thorough communication. So again, knowing your work, planning accordingly is very important. And again, the person that's going to help you move this work forward in the BART system is going to be that RE. So they have the most knowledge about who to talk to if they don't know, right? And where to go within the BART system to get the appropriate support for you as a subcontractor or general contractor. Again, surveying existing conditions. I mentioned that earlier. Maybe you may be working on, let's put, for example, the canopy structure here on the left, right? This is actually a project that I'm managing for Bart as the RE, and that's the Market Street Canopies project where we're building 19 canopies up and down Market Street at 4 different stations. These are above the stair entries, and they're designed to protect the escalator and stair entry from the elements. It's followed by a replacement of escalators as well. Surveying an existing condition in this environment is very important. You have to know all the ins and outs of the existing stair entrances, utilities that may be impacting your work, hard electrical and communications infrastructure that has to be tied into your work. So again, advanced survey of existing conditions, and this is just one example, but it shows you, really kind of gives you an overview of the importance of it, so that you can complete your work and not be delayed, not impact Bart's assets that are already in place. As Nick mentioned earlier, if you impact Bart's operations, yeah, you know, it's problematic. If you impact their revenue, let me tell you, there's really big LDs in the summary of work. If you shut down access to, let's say, a station, or trains can't run, or there's no lights, it's an hourly impact that's really high, and it's pretty severe. So you want to avoid that at any cost possible. So that's an important thing to keep in mind when you're doing your work. Submitting RFIs in advance of field work is critical. If you don't understand how to perform your work, if there's something that's impacting the potential performance of that planned work, submitting a request for information in advance is important so that the architects, engineers, RE can look at it and get back to you and give you clarification and help you move forward with your planned work. Again, coordinating with the RE to understand support requirements. They're going to know how to obtain support for you, whether, let's say, it's an electrical support, you need an electrician from maintenance to work with your team in a train control room or an electrical room to remove a panel and work on that electrical panel. There's a lot of requirements towards performing that work, but one of them is having a Bart electrician there to make sure that you're performing it in accordance with Bart's requirements, that you're not damaging an asset or doing something that could impact operations. That would also require the IC. Again, coordinating detailed support requests prior to system access review and approval. This all just threads together, right? All of this is advanced planning, understanding, communication, and the more that you do this, the better off you're going to be. You're not going to run into at least any impacts that you created or your team is creating. You can't count for what's going on in the Bart world. Sometimes there's emergencies that occur. Can't get support personnel out there for you. Again, there's that operations delay allowance you can utilize. But try to make sure that the work is not impacted or because of poor planning or poor execution, because then it's going to be difficult to have you get reimbursed for your time, and time is money, as we all know. Let's jump to the next slide. Okay, I think I'm going to turn this one back to Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Luis. To just quickly go over kind of the key items we talked about today. We highlighted the fact that this advanced planning and advanced coordination is critical at Bart in order to ensure that you are really vetting how you're going to get your work done. You're doing this because it's a time-consuming process to actually get the SSWP put together, get it vetted, get it approved by all these different parties, and get yourself out there. And then also to ensure that you're planning ahead for your week-by-week system access requests that are kind of come from your resident engineer. We talked about the fact that you really need to know where you're working and when, because the location of and the area, say whether it's a train control room or it's a station or you're in the trackway, it really affects the type of support and the type of the process for how your resident engineer is going to it changes this request that he's going to be putting into Bart. So the resident engineer needs to know exactly where you're going to be working and what you're going to be doing so he can properly support your work out in the field. Your communication, as we said, with your resident engineer, if you can start building that rapport and communicating your needs early, they can actually step in and help you out. They can also do things such as set up meetings with all these stakeholders with you out in the field. They can set up coordination, like online meetings with the different stakeholders and you as the contractor to make sure that, hey, they understand what you're about to do and that they can give you the proper information to know how you can most effectively get your work done as a contractor out in the field, so you're not wasting time and being inefficient. So it's good the resident engineer can be a big ally in this process. Also, just determining what making sure the best practices, some of this information that Elise went over before, figuring out what your specific project needs are and how the best way to execute your work. And that will depend on, where you're working and how. And as a subcontractor, if you're a prime and you're managing your subs, you really need to ensure that you are getting this information from your subs the same way that the Bart resident engineer needs this information from their prime contractor. The only way they can get that information from the subs is if the prime contractor is doing the same thing with their subs, right? So if you're the prime and you have key subs, you really should be bringing them in early for planning and understanding their work and how they want to execute it, what equipment they're going to use, how they plan to stage it, where they want to store it, how they plan on bringing it in. These are the type of things conversations you should be having with your subs. And if you're a sub, you should really be early on thinking this out and sharing this information with your prime contractor and saying, look, this is how I plan on getting my equipment in here. This is how I plan on getting my work done. Here's the areas where I'm going to be working, just to make sure that, so then they can go to Bart and the resident engineer and advocate for you and properly plan for you. So in general, those are the key takeaways from this. Is just, as we went through, just you got to really work hard on your planning and your preparation. And if you do that, the Bart stakeholders and the Bart resident engineer and EIC, all these players, they want to have you be successful, but they also want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that will keep Bart running. Because in the end of the day, Bart's number one purpose is to run trains that serve the community in that aspect. So that's where their priorities are. So as long as you can support them in that and get your work done, they'll be happy to support you to get your work done as well. You can go to the next slide, Harry. All right, and then we'll turn it over to questions. So if you have any questions, please ask, and we'll try to answer the best we can or point you into the best direction into where to get that information.
Okay. So again, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question if you have any questions. I would like to say that additionally that this webinar will be saved and posted on our YouTube channel. We have a Small Business Support Services YouTube channel where this will be available for future reference, and we can send the presentation out to you by request if you like afterwards.
Harry, I would like to mention one thing is that we have a variety of other workshops available as well.
Yes.
We have a very detailed workshop on the SSWP.
Yes.
And so anybody interested in that can find that workshop as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're very, very proud of that workshop. We worked very closely with the operations department to get firsthand information to put that together. You know, we appreciate our support from Bart. A question, a quick question. I thought of myself. Roadway, is it railway protection training? RWP training, is that required on all of Bart projects or some of the projects?
Want to take that, Nick, or I could take it? I mean, it doesn't matter. Roadway
Yeah,
training. Go ahead.
it depends on where you're working. So it just, if you're working within with the operating envelope. So if you're working, say, in the trackway, or you're having to like that, it's mostly on the areas that are actually in that working envelope. So they'll have to have one of your employees be RWP trained. But it depends on location. So your RE will really enforce that. So if you want to have that discussion with the resident engineer, they will tell you based on where you're working and what you're doing. And I believe that information is also in the specifications itself. We could look and confirm that, but there is a key spec section that goes over all of the operating information. And so if you look at what's that? It's 01R, it's 0135. What is it? It's 01.
3514.
Let's see, I'm trying to think of it off the top of my head. 0135. I'll pull it up right. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now.
I didn't mean to test your exact spec knowledge.
No,
down to
I
the
want to pull it up.
exact
No, because
line.
this is really important. Oh, 013514. So you really should look through that spec section and in detail. That's a really critical spec section to look through. That goes over all the operating envelope and operating items that we were discussing today. A lot of that information's in there, and it'll be really, that'll be a really important one to look through thoroughly.
As you mentioned, I think the RE is the one that's going to be able to guide you as to whether someone on your team, perhaps the superintendent or a foreman, needs to be RWP trained. Typically, the CM team, which will be the RE inspectors, office engineers, ARE, they have their RWP training and can be with the contractor if needed in these kind of sensitive areas. Especially if it's not a long-term thing, then RWP training may not be required for the contractor personnel, but it is a 40-hour training, a full week. So that should be accounted for if it's necessary.
Is that required training reimbursed by Bart?
I don't believe so.
So you have to build that into your bid basically, and you have to account for that as you understand the project you're approaching. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there any other questions from anybody? Comments? Current contractors?
This is Darlene
Oh.
Jones. I have a question.
Yeah, hello, Darlene.
How you doing,
Yes, I'm good. How are you doing?
everyone? Good morning. Or we on our way to the afternoon. Soon.
Yes.
I was told by I was at the event for the California High Speed Rail, and it was mentioned that when you work near the railroads and the anything rail related, that there's some kind of special permit that all of the firms are supposed to have. Is that a requirement for Bart as well?
I'm sorry, a special commitment?
Permit. I think she said
Oh,
permit.
permit. Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
It's okay.
That may be the
some
RWP
kind of
permit.
permit, like we have to have, like, the permit is association with a particular kind of insurance. Like it was like something added, like for protection of everybody that's working and at the place, and to protect your firm as well. Are you aware of any extra added insurance coverage or some kind of special permit?
I'm not aware of any insurance per se that's required for working near the trackway, but Bart has different types of insurance programs, right? And typically its contractor provides insurance at the levels required by the district. And those are pretty much laid out in the special proposal, and you'll know what you're bidding on.
Okay. Okay, that's fair enough. It'll be within the scope. I mean,
Yeah, but there are internal requirements for working around the trackway that are pretty stringent. And again, that 013514 specification that Nick mentioned will lead you to a good understanding of the layers and protections required by Bart for working around the trackway. And certainly, if you had personnel around that, they would have to be RWP trained, roadway worker protection. That's a 40-hour training you have to build into your bid.
I see. Okay, well, guess it's never too early to sign up for the training.
Best of luck.
Of course, thank you for the question. Any other questions? Well, I guess we'll wrap it up. I don't know, no other questions. We've covered all the information that we have. Again, here's the contact information for our team, including our presenters, myself. Fei Lu is our contact with the Office of Civil Rights, who handles professional services. And of course, Paul Pendergast is our pre-award project administrator. And so again, we want to thank you for joining us. And I guess that will conclude our webinar for this morning.
Harry, just let me ask before you leave, if people
Yes.
have questions on a one-on-one basis, they should contact you as a way to get to one of our technical assistance specialists. Is that the best way?
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for adding that. Yes. I am the initial contact person. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions for a copy of the presentation, what have you. We have our one-on-one technical assistance where we have REs such as Mr. Paez and Mr. Houchin, who may be available to assist with your BART issues. Again, the goal of our program is for you to succeed. And if there's one way that we can help you save some money is by reducing the number of resubmittals. There's not a lot that our program can do, but time is money. And it saves everybody time to get your submittals through the first time. And that goes from invoicing and pay apps to baseline schedules to SSWPs. I mean, we are here to help you review the entire process, to help you navigate. There's a lot of requirements to get BART work done. And again, time is money. So that's what we're here for. That's what BART pays us to do, is to help you.
Harry, thank you for that. I just want to add one thing is this is a collaborative approach that we do, right? We don't do your work for you. We want to help you learn as a contractor, as a sub, on how to efficiently and effectively complete your work. We don't do your submittals, shop drawings, but we do help you understand what the requirements are, answer questions, help guide you through the myriad of requirements that BART has that could impact you. So we're a good resource as well as your RE, right? I want you to understand that. But yeah, we're certainly here to assist and help you to become successful and understand the BART environment so that you can continue to bid on work and again make money.
That's the goal.
Yes. Well, thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you again for joining us. and have a good day.
You all, thank you for attending.
Thank you all. Everybody have a good weekend. It's going to be rainy, so be careful. Be safe out there.